and welcome to tonight's Commonwealth Club World Affairs program. My name is DJ Patil. I'm a general partner at Great Point Ventures, former U.S. Chief Data Scientist, and member of the Commonwealth Club World Affairs Board of Governors. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel. Dr. Emanuel is a renowned bioethicist, oncologist, and health policy expert. He currently serves as Vice Provost for Global Initiatives and Professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Emanuel was one of the architects of the Affordable Care Act, author of numerous books, a regular on the New York Times, NPR, Washington Post, and anywhere where over 1 million people read every day. And an author, and most importantly, he is the author of the new book, Eat Your Ice Cream: 6 Simple Rules for a Long and Healthy Life. He is also the person I call personally when I am thinking about any hard policy question, issue that is dealing with the country internationally, or specifically looking at the nuances of different types of chocolate and where to source them from. So Dr. Emanuel, welcome back to the club and congratulations on your new book. All right. Okay, so this is going to be fun. There is so much to go through on this book. Even though it is such a fast read, it is really, it's like you downloaded wisdom onto the page.
Well, thank you.
And so I want to start with this, which is right on page 2, you start with this line, which is, remember the first rule of life. We are all going to die. You can waste all of your time trying to extend your life by a few minutes obsessing over scores of adjustments to your diet or exercise routines, or you can just follow 6 straightforward, smart wellness behaviors to make the time you have healthier and more meaningful. The thing is about that line is then I opened up Instagram and I was slammed with cold plunges, fasting regimens, and all sorts of other things. You're a doctor, a policy leader. What is going on between the world of science, medicine, and social media?
I can't explain social media, but actually you do raise one of the more interesting things, which is this sort of obsession we've had with wellness for the last, depends how long you think it is, 10, 15, 20 years, is not the first time America's gone through an obsession with wellness. Beginning in about the 1870s to about 1914, we had an obsession with wellness. And you will recall that period, the Gilded Age, big income inequalities. It was the second industrial revolution where people were being displaced, a lot of immigration and people moving from rural areas into cities. And you also had a lot of, therefore, xenophobia, anti-Semitism. You also had a lot of small wars. People were worried about the integrity of the food system. That was the time when Upton Sinclair's The Jungle was published.
Where did Greenland sit in this?
Oh, wow.
Is that too soon?
No,
Okay,
that was Cuba, remember?
Cuba.
The Spanish-American War
Yeah.
in the Philippines. Very similar moment. The world is topsy-turvy. People are feeling like they don't control. The world controls them. They don't know where it's going. And it turns out that wellness is probably one of the areas they think they can assert their autonomy. Way back when, it was also big opposition to vaccines. Then it was a smallpox vaccine. Now it's obviously measles, mumps, and rubella, and all the other ones. Very similar moments. And I think that this wellness response is a big push into, I want to control my little part of the world. But the whole Instagram thing, I think, is, for one thing, the wellness industrial complex is worth $1 to $2 trillion in this country, depending upon what you want to include in it. Very conservatively, $1 trillion. That's 3% of the country's GDP into wellness. So lots of people making money off of it, lots of people selling things to you, and feeding the beast with all sorts of nonsense. I just want to make clear to everyone here, I'm selling you nothing.
Fair point. So part of this that I'm interested in also is because what we see is this rise of wellness over just the last I don't know, 20 years, 30 years. It used to be that the wellness thing was really driven by talk shows or on radio. It was very constrained. Like there was a choke point now. Now anybody can be a wellness person. And one of the things I'm interested in also here is, as a clinician and as an educator of the next cadre of physicians, it feels like there's a constant tension for who owns the attention and giving the high quality content to the individual.
Yes, well, let me begin by saying that every doctor I tell about the book, before they've read the book, is like, someone is saying this because they're fed up with the wellness industrial complex, every influencer out there spouting nonsense. And they want sort of, it's really simple. On the other hand, I would say that I think by and large, the medical establishment sort of gave up wellness. We gave up, we haven't talked a lot about nutrition. There are some people that have. We haven't talked a lot about exercise, sleep with our patients. And so I think part of the absence has meant people have migrated to, as you point out, Instagram, looking for answers out there. But the way Instagram and all the platforms work, they send you stuff whether you ask for it or not. So now 90+% of people have gotten some unsolicited healthcare oomph from out there, often unsubstantiated. And a lot of the influencers out there, you look at what they're saying and you're like, you think that's going to add any amount of time to your life? It's seems to be a lot of nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that I loved in the book is it's so practical across these six rules. Maybe we should just cover the 6 rules real quick, just as a cheat sheet and sort of a layout map for how this conversation goes. Because I thought the first portion, which starts off as "don't be a schmuck," is sort of like the dumb moments, and I found myself sending my kids, who are very annoyed, just different screenshots of lines that were underlined by this. But maybe walk us through a little bit of the 6 points.
Well, my father used to, he had this practice of sort of hitting his kids on the back of the head and saying, "Don't be a schmuck," when we were doing something stupid. And it's a constant theme in our family. If you do something stupid, you're being a schmuck. And so I went through and figured out, what are the schmucky things we do that we shouldn't be doing, right? Smoking, vaping, alcohol we could talk about because I think people have been pulled and pushed in crazy directions. And then I spent a lot of time thinking, what's the absolute schmuckiest thing that you could do? And I thought for a long time it was base jumping. You get that Michelin squirrel suit, you jump off a mountain, no propeller, no parachute, no nothing. And it turns out that your chance of dying by base jumping is 1 in 2,700. Yeah. And I was like, wow. And then I did a little more research. There's something even more schmucky than that. Climbing Mount Everest. Yeah? The chance of dying climbing Mount Everest is 1 in 100 of all comers, mountaineers, Sherpas, everyone. And it's like, and if you're over 59, and at least some of us are in that category, 1 in 25. And I said, what could be stupider than spending $125,000 to take a 1 in 25 chance of risk that your bones are just going to stay up on Mount Everest forever? Really dumb. And then I figured it out. There's something even more schmucky than that. Being president. We've had 45 men president, right? 4 have been assassinated in office. Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, and Kennedy, right? That's a 1 in 11 chance of not making it through. And then if you include the successful assassination attempts, right? Like shooting Reagan or shooting at Teddy Roosevelt, right? It turns out there are 8 of those. So, 12 presidents have been, attempted assassinations, 4 successful. That's the schmuckiest thing you can do is be president. Yeah. Just remember that.
Or the natural correlation, the conclusion should just elect a female president.
Well, we should try that, yes. I'm all for that.
Part of what I think is interesting is you came up with all these really interesting nuggets, factoids throughout the book. How much AI did you use?
Zero. I can't write with AI. I have to write it myself. It doesn't capture my voice, so there's zero AI in there. And
I feel like you should have like a label, like certified, like
human. It's human.
Right. Well, but maybe so that's chapter 1 is about.
Oh wait, I should also add owning guns.
Yeah.
And I'm here in California. And owning guns, so there's a huge study in California done by some Stanford researchers, 18 million, I think, people involved. And it turns out that if you own a gun, you're twice as likely to die by gun homicide than a neighbor who doesn't own a gun. And the reason for that is that gun violence is mostly done by family and acquaintances. And unfortunately, if you have a gun, it tends to be loaded and in an accessible spot. So a lot of kids get killed, which is why gun violence is the number one way kids die, exceeding swimming and being in a bath and things like that.
Let's take that. Let's just follow that thread, because you're highlighting a lot of stats that are so staggering. It's like it literally falls into "don't be a schmuck" category.
Yes,
it's so obvious. We have entered a time of intellectual disparity where we despise facts
experts. Yes,
and experts. This actually gets into another portion of the book, which you spend a bunch of time on, that I want to actually ask you some more questions on that in a little bit. But I wonder how you, as a person who's looking at the data, confronted with like the reality, and then seeing what is happening in the news, what's happening in federal policy that goes directly into the schmuck category. I know you clearly want to smack someone upside the head for it, but I'd love your reaction.
Yes. Well, I think part of the problem, the misinformation, the sort of attack on expertise, there's a lot of elements to it. One is the democratization or pseudo-democratization of knowledge. But I also think that a lot of experts have given up an attempt to communicate to the public in a way that's accessible to the public. And so I think it's less what we're saying and more how we're saying it. And we need to figure out how to say it in a way that people can respond. So, the old days used to be vertical, right? There was an expert dressed in a white coat with a stethoscope on, and everyone thought people would believe. Now it's more horizontal. You have to be authentic. You have to be accessible, intimate. I've learned a little bit of that. One of the things I've had to do for this book, and you have to do if you're going to publish anything now, is go on social media. And you learn that you can communicate real facts in an entertaining way without giving up the rigor or scientific expertise. But you have to change how you communicate. And I think one of the things the experts haven't done is figured out that the communication landscape has changed. And if we're going to get facts out there and get people to believe facts, we have to meet people where they are. And I've tried to do that. I don't know whether I'm successful or not. I'm still learning it. But I do think we don't have to give up what we're communicating. We have to modify how we're communicating, and we haven't adapted to the modern landscape.
We got burgeoning scientists out there, people who are experts in the areas. Any advice, any lessons learned that can help them draft off of what you've learned so far?
I think the first rule is don't give up the facts. You have to maintain your integrity. And then try things. It's like you're going to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Nothing is, you're not going to be defined by your mistakes. I've made plenty of them on social media. But you try things and see what resonates with people. And I can assure you, I have the most difficult critics right at home. I like to say to my students, say whatever you want to me, Nothing you say is anywhere near as bad as what my brothers tell me all the time. So, it's like, You have to have a thick skin and just try it,
Yeah.
and then learn. Again, one of the things that I hope comes across in the book is Ben Franklin's a big hero of mine, and one of the keys to Ben Franklin was constantly trying to improve himself, constantly going for moral growth. He knew he had prejudices, he knew he made mistakes, but he was always trying to improve himself. And I think that's the thing. We're not going to be perfect. We're human, right? But we can commit ourselves to always trying to be better. And that's sort of my goal.
Okay. I want to take us back to the schmuck category because it's so fun. One of the sections in there that you talk about smoking, you highlight in there that every time you light up a cigarette, it's 20 minutes off of your life. But the part there that I thought was really interesting is vaping. Both vaping with nicotine, with THC, when we were working together. During the Obama administration, we made a hardcore press with Rod Califf and others to really try to clamp down on these pathways. I'm wondering maybe you could talk us through a little bit about what the research is saying between vaping, cigarette use, THC, marijuana.
Well, vaping is probably safer than smoking. It definitely is safer than smoking. But I think we mistake safer than as safe. And it's definitely not safe. There's a lot of things that you inhale. You get a lot of kids get addicted to the nicotine, use more and more of it. We're now seeing this switch from vaping to pouches in the mouth, where get ever more pouches to get that nicotine buzz. And anything that's going to affect your brain is going to change your brain chemistry, and it doesn't come free. And the same thing is true of marijuana, right? First of all, the marijuana that's being used today, that's being legalized, is way stronger than the marijuana I grew up with. And the fact is that there's about 10% of people who use marijuana are actually addicted to it. A lot of people, especially if you use it early, it affects your memory. It definitely decreases your academic performance and your cognitive abilities. Again, is it better than alcohol? Well, probably. Does that make it safe and good? Probably not. And I think, the marijuana issue is like, the first thing is, I hate places that say, we're legalizing medical marijuana, because that makes liars of every doctor. Right? Someone comes in and says, I need marijuana, right? And so you make up some diagnosis. Over 50 years old, needs marijuana. It's crazy. And so I think we should just be straightforward about it. And I think we've created a social experiment with no data and controls before it. And I object to that.
Yeah. And any takes on, as a policymaker, on the great social experiments going on, California, Denver, Colorado versus other states?
No, I don't have enough insight. Honestly, I just don't spend that much time looking at the variations. I will say that I think the marijuana legalization is often driven by taxes and revenue rather than by good social policy, which is a very bad place to be. So
well, let's kind of go on that direction of that, because one of the things that you highlight in the book, which I thought was a really good one, is about drinking, and particularly one of the things is like when it is okay to drink, when it's not okay to drink, and I would kind of want to parlay this into the report that you highlight from our good friend, two-time Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. And so maybe take us through what you found between alcohol use, your advice you give people on alcohol use, and some of the results that we're seeing across the worldwide, actually, as you highlight, about loneliness.
Yeah, so first of all, we've been sort of whipsawed about alcohol. Is it healthy? Is it not? You should have a glass of red wine. No, you shouldn't. I think the bottom line is, from a physical standpoint, looking at what alcohol does to the body, It's not good for the liver, causes cirrhosis of the liver and related problems. It's also not good from a cancer standpoint. I'm an oncologist. There are at least 7 cancers that are risk is increased because of alcohol. It's not good for your sleeping. We know that causes, might make you sleepy, but it causes disrupted sleeping and not good for the brain. So there's a lot of health issues. A lot of arguments about, is it 0? Is it, 3 glasses of alcohol a week? It's somewhere in that range. On the other hand, 65% or 70% of Americans drink. We're not taking that down to 0. And I think the idea that, you should all abstain, just unrealistic. So we have to think about alcohol in another way. In addition, what is a major way of drinking alcohol is to facilitate social interactions. And that's a good thing. We want people to interact. It's good for their mental health. It's good for their physical health. So we have to balance those two. It may not be the best thing for your physical health, but it may be really good for your social interaction. And that's a good positive health benefit. So I suggest that we've got some rules. One is no binge drinking, really bad for your health, right? Don't drink alone. Also, not a good thing. Don't drink to drown out your sorrows. And don't drink a lot at one sitting, even if you're not binge drinking. 3, 4, 5 glasses of whatever at one sitting is a very bad idea. A glass of wine over dinner with friends, probably a really good idea.
Mm-hmm. When you think about the loneliness epidemic, this is, I think, you really spend a lot of time in this. There was the stat that stunned me that you put down. We hear about loneliness, but you put it down there, which I think is important to highlight to everyone here. Is in 1990, 63% of Americans had 5 or more close friends. Today is only 38%. Even in 1990, that's a low number of 63%. But to cut it down to 38% is a crisis.
Right.
And so we are also faced with that wellness industry who are highlighting get up at 4:30 a.m., the solitude bro culture. I don't know if it has a good name, but it's like, suffer alone and you have to be the CEO that does sort of crazy things.
I think my RAs call it the Sigma grind set or something like that. Go to the gym and just work out alone. And it's all terrible. And the flip side of it is if you survey Americans, it used to be 6% of people had 0 or 1 close friends, and now it's 1 in 5. It's a major crisis, and I think the report that the Surgeon General released on this, Vivek released on this a few years ago, is a real landmark drawing attention. And the first thing I like to emphasize about social connection, and the reason I put it so centrally in the book is, first of all, most wellness people never talk about social connections. It's far and away the single most important thing for wellness. It's not psychological. It's not in your mind or whatever you want to say, because your mind is right here between your 2 ears. The fact is that social connections alter your body, right? They change. They lead you to secrete oxytocin. They increase your dopamine in your brain. They also downregulate your cortisol, the stress hormones you release. It's good for your entire body. And we are made as social animals. This is a fact that's been known. Aristotle wrote, man is a social animal 2,500 years ago. This is not a new phenomenon. What we've ignored is how important it is for us in terms of wellness. Lots and lots of studies, involving more than 3 million people worldwide, have followed people in terms of social connections and life expectancy. The biggest and longest, not the biggest, the longest is the Harvard Adult Development Study, started in the 30s and followed people for 85 years, shows that the people who live the longest, live the healthiest, and the happiest are the people with close friends. Repeated in China, you've got studies in Sweden, in Australia, and lots of other countries showing the exact same thing. And we now have this epidemic of loneliness, and we have to break it down. And part of the problem is cell phones. It's not only cell phones, it's lots of other social factors that are driving people apart. We're up to 50% of people eat a meal a day alone. I mean, it's just crazy kind of phenomena. And so part of the book is to really change that. And one of the things, you need close friends, but you also need casual social interactions. We go through life thinking, we don't have to say anything to people. Some people like Waymo so they don't have to talk to the driver. I actually like drivers. I live in Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C. is the second largest city, Ethiopian city in the world. Only Addis Ababa has more Ethiopians. Washington, D.C. is the second largest. And they dominate the cab and Uber industry. You get into a cab there, and there's an Ethiopian. And the first thing I say is, where are you from? And they say, I'm from Ethiopia. I said, I've been to Ethiopia 5 times. And they light up. They are so, where have you been? And I told them I've been to Gondar, I've been to Lalibela, Addis Ababa, and I asked them where their family's from. We have a whole conversation, right? And it makes their day, and it makes my day. I've learned something about them, what brought them here, how much family's still there, what their view of the government is. I got a whole disquisition on this current government in Ethiopia the last time I took a Uber to the airport. It's really... It's amazing. And I get on an airplane. The person sitting next to me, I ask them, why are you going to San Francisco? Do you work there? Do you live there? Lots of those interactions, really beneficial. They're no replacement for close ties of people who, I talk to my brothers, 5, 6, 7 times a week, and, sometimes 5, 6, 7 times a day. They're all about 60 seconds because my brothers don't say a lot. But you know a lot about your family, right? You speak in code, and it's rejuvenating. And, it is something that's really important to us, and we don't do enough of it. And we have to do more.
Well said. The natural questions, there's 2 types of questions I think that emerge for me. One is for those that are out there that are already, in that 38% of the population that don't have, like the majority that don't have close friends today, what do they do? And the second is we have a whole generation that we've seen the effects of COVID and just being isolated. And not just the youth, but just in general, and people, whether it's drinking and not recovering from that to just social isolation. And I'm wondering if you've seen any trends or have any pragmatic advice for people about how to get on the right side of this curve. If you will, what's your prescription for them?
Yeah. Well, before I turn to that, let me say, I think there's a clear prescription for younger kids that we as a society can implement. And that is bell to bell in school, no cell phones. Mm-hmm. First of all, good data that it increases academic performance. And I can tell you from my own experience, I banned the cell phones in my class, and I banned computers in my class, and kids' attention to what's happening goes way up. Data are that about 70 minutes of every school day, kids are on their cell phones. How can you learn if you're spending more than an hour on your cell phone through the classroom? So I think we can actually cultivate in kids. And one of the things I've noticed in my classroom when I have no cell phones is before the class starts, lots more chatter. It's a lot louder. They're talking to each other, which is a good thing. And I think schools find this, disciplinary action goes down, school performance goes up, and noise levels actually go up, which is something you want to encourage. So we can actually begin.
Let's stay on this for a sec, because I think it's important to this audience to know, because you and I have talked about this a bunch, which is it's not just about banning cell phones. It's about the way you teach and engage. You have to create a product that is more engaging about this.
Yeah. And kids want to, I think we don't challenge kids enough. That's my own opinion. But kids want to pay attention, want to feel like they're going to learn something and more from you than from the phone. I would say for people of our age, I do agree with you. I think one of the things we did not calculate, and I include myself, is the social cost of the social isolation during COVID. Now, one of the things I never understood is why we sort of blocked off playgrounds and public spaces like parks and beaches where the air was blowing and the chance of infection were pretty low. That was a huge mistake, and I think had very adverse outcomes for people interacting. I think your question is getting, we know from research that what the sort of rules around social engagement, how long you look at a person's eyes, what do you say, what's the exchange, we've lost a lot of those skills, and they are skills you learn from your environment. You're not born with them. That's why the Japanese are different than the Americans, because different cultures, you learn the different kinds of practices, and we have to recultivate those practices. So, my father, when I was growing up, was he was a inveterate extrovert. He always liked to talk to people all the time. He was not a very spiritual person. He didn't think about big questions like, how big is the universe? When's it going to end? Who created it? He couldn't care about that. On the other hand, we'd go into a restaurant whenever we were taking road trips, and he would start talking to the next table. As a kid, you hated that. But, he would get into conversations, and I learned a lot about starting conversations. He would ask a question like, how long you been here? What do you do here, right? What brought your family here? What do you like about where you're living? And invariably, these people did not feel like they were getting an FBI interrogation, but someone was interested in their life, and it would cause a nice conversation. And I learned, most people want to talk. They might not know how, and they might be slightly hesitant to actually initiate it. Turns out, again, research suggests we're hesitant because we think the other person will think we're stupid and we are going to waste our time. Turns out almost never to be true. The other thing I learned from that is if it didn't go well, if the other table, say, was monosyllabic and, just didn't want to engage, my father would always sort of brush it off. He didn't lose anything, It didn't bruise his ego. He figured something's wrong in their life, someone might have gotten ill. Something might have happened at their job. Who knows what happened? But it wasn't a reflection of him. And so, the next time we went into a restaurant, he started again. And I think that's a really good
skill.
It's a good skill
you
to
practice
have.
it.
Exactly, but you're exactly right, DJ. You have to practice it. And I think one of the great things about talking to your Uber driver, your barista, your waitress, whoever it is you practice the skill. You practice, this is how I ask a question. It's a simple question, So one of my research assistants, very, very recently, like 3 weeks ago, was at a new restaurant across the street from where he lived, and he called me up right after, and he eating a burger at the bar, and he says, I am not living according to the book I just helped give all the citations to. So he asked the bartender across, he says, there's a new restaurant. Where did you work at before? That was his opening question, right? Turned out, after a few more exchanges, she was getting a master's in healthcare management, and he's doing research for me in health policy. And they had a whole long 30-minute conversation. And about halfway through the conversation, the guy next door says, oh, you were in my film class at college, and you really like film, and you talked a lot. And, 45 minutes later, he leaves the restaurant, and he's feeling great. He's had a full conversation, got to know some people. None of them are going to be his close friends. But it turns out that this is a skill you can develop. And if you don't take yourself so seriously, like every conversation is an ego test, you can have a very, very rewarding and fulfilling time and cultivate those skills. And so part of the book, I'm hoping, is to encourage people to start asking questions of someone. Yeah. And by the way, I will say, there's a lot of research that if you do actually talk to strangers, like on the train ride into work or the bus or a plane ride, you actually feel better and they feel better. You're doing a good job for them. You're raising their wellness quotient. It's a good thing. And that's true even if you're introverted.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a story that, I got told when the days were dark at the White House was go outside the gate, sit in the front where everyone's taking selfies with the building, and ask them why they're there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it'll give you an instant jolt of energy.
Yeah.
And just because it's a human connection. It's not just that it's the White House. It's that it's a human connection that carries you through.
Yep.
Well, I want to remind the audience, both online and those in person, we are taking your questions. So I'll be getting those in just a minute. So if you don't have, if you haven't gotten it in yet, start putting them in. Online, it's through the chat. I want to go through some quick hits because there's a lot of stuff in there of things. So we got the cell phone usage. We've gotten to vaping, cigarettes, fasting.
Yes. No reason to do it. If you're inclined to do it, you can fast. There's all sorts of formulas. I'll tell you what I do, which is I fast for 24 hours once a week. I like to fast breakfast to breakfast because the last 8 hours I'm asleep. But, sometimes I go dinner to dinner. There's some evidence, it's not conclusive, that it leads to rejuvenation of cells. You're stressing the cells, they break down defective proteins, repair DNA, defective cells get replaced. The problem is we just haven't done long-term studies of this, and that effect, the importance of that effect, you're not going to see in 12-week studies or even a year-long studies. And that brings me to another point, which I haven't mentioned, is wellness is something that you're going to have to do for your whole life, years and decades. It's not something that you can do 1 week, you're done, or dry January. What a stupid idea. Okay? What are you doing the next 11 months? Drinking away? Dry January has done no good for you. These are things you're going to have to, so they have to become habits, and you have to enjoy them. And if there's believe me, most people say, I can't fast a whole day. I understand, all right? Don't do it, okay? It's not critical, and we have no idea how long it's going to extend your life, if at all. I actually don't find it problematic. I will tell you about 16 hours when my body shifts.
I get cold.
That's it.
I get 100%. And my wife just hates me. She's like, you are so cranky.
Yeah, that's why I do it at night. So when I sort of get cold as I'm getting towards sleep. And you're exactly right. That's the big problem I have. Other people have different problems. But so I do it. I have no difficulty doing it. I can easily fast for about 36 hours.
All right, let's go to the next one. Protein.
Yeah. Almost all Americans get enough protein. Stop worrying about it. That's my bottom line. This idea of protein in your coffee, protein in your beer, protein here, there, and everywhere, forget it. We really do get enough protein. That is not our shortage.
Where's this coming from? Because you can't buy something in the store without it being fortified with
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I think this is where it came from. It came from some of these influencers who are suggesting you ought to work out for 10 hours a week. Okay, if you're going to work out 10 hours a week, you're probably going to need a lot more protein. But that's a stupid amount of time to work out.
Actually, I don't want to spoil this because you have a great section in the book about stats, about the different breakdown of what the impact is based on the intervals that you work out. But that's why you have to read the book. Moving on to, this is like rile up Zeke list, fiber.
Yes, this is the thing that we are totally deficient in. So 93% of Americans don't get enough fiber. It's insane. That is going to be the next fad, by the way, for sure. And it's not that complicated. Fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables, they give you all the fiber you need, and they give you different kinds of fiber, which are very important for your gut microbiome. So forget the prebiotics, just eat your fruits and vegetables. So my recommendation for breakfast is a bowl of berries, yogurt, granola, and heart hemps. You've got everything there. You've got a lot of protein in the yogurt and the heart hemps. You've got the fiber, right? It's great.
For people that don't know what heart hemps are, what is that? I could sense, I could feel the vibe.
They come in little packages. They're little itty bitty things, and you just sprinkle them on 1 tablespoon or 2 tablespoons.
Okay.
Great. And they've also got omega-3s and 6s, which are good for you.
And is the yogurt because of fermented? Because that was going to be one of my.
It's a dairy product. I am very pro-dairy. Not everyone is pro-dairy. One of my great professors
This is California,
Yeah.
a great dairy producing state.
Yeah, you're the number one dairy producing state. I bet you didn't know that. Only Wisconsin's number two.
Take that, cheddar heads.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Dairy is good. You don't worry about low fat versus high fat versus normal fat, whatever. The data makes no difference. So you like the full fat? Good. And it makes you taller. Good evidence to that. Reduces your
He's not joking. Huh? You're not joking about the taller.
Reduces your colorectal cancer risk. Reduces your risk of diabetes type 2. Does increase some risk, endometrial cancer, prostate cancer. But net, I'm for it. Not everyone is for it. And I should say my great professor, Walt Willett from the Harvard School of Public Health, he wrote a great review in the New England Journal about 5 years ago. Very objective. He's a little more hesitant about it. I do think in the RFK Jr.'s new dietary guidelines, they're pushing full-fat dairy, and I do agree with them on that point, and especially the fermented dairy. So cottage cheese, kefir, yogurt, very, very good for you. Aged cheeses, that Gruyere. Mwah.
Well said. We're getting a lot of questions, naturally, on GLP-1s.
Yes. I'm very pro GLP-1s. I've written a lot about GLP-1s. I think they're one of the 5 great advances in medicine since the 2000 and the sort of end of the Human Genome Project, along with mRNA and CAR T therapy and things like that that were developed at Penn, I might say. But GLP-1s, first of all, they are very, very powerful in terms of reducing obesity, reducing diabetes risk, 20% weight loss. They decrease your risk for cardiovascular disease within 1 year by about 20%. They're having many other effects. No one anticipated they would cross the blood-brain barrier and affect the reward system, so change your relationship to alcohol, to gambling, to other addictions. I have a very, very dear friend who I went to college with and has had a difficult time with his weight his entire life. And I said to him, you should try GLP-1s. Go to your primary care doctor. Ask him about getting onto a GLP-1. Literally overnight transformed his relationship with food. Recently, he's had a change in insurance because they moved towns and jobs. And he said he went for a month without the GLP-1, and it almost drove him nuts. Almost instantaneously, he began to have cravings that had gone away. So they're really good. On the other hand, are they a solution to our obesity epidemic? Absolutely not, right? The way we're going to get out of obesity is not by giving everyone GLP-1s. We do have to change our food system. We right now Americans heavily consume ultra-processed food. 60% of our calories come from ultra-processed foods. It's a disaster. We're the highest country in the world. And that part of that reason is we subsidize corn, soybean, wheat, rice, all the things that go into ultra-processed food.
Let's stay on, help people understand because there's a number of questions that come in around processed food, ultra-processed food. Slow it down for us a bit, or break it down for us.
Well, the ultra-processed food is what we used to call junk food. And it's basically, packaged cakes, packaged cookies, the frozen pizzas, the Doritos, all sorts of lots of the cereals that we have out there. And they're made from components that have been made cheap by subsidies and put together by big food manufacturers. They're not natural things that you buy in the produce section or the meat section or the dairy section of your grocery store. They're basically the stuff in the middle of the grocery store, what Marion Nestle, the great nutrition scientist at NYU, calls the junkyard of grocery stores. And, if you ever go down the aisle, you go down an aisle and on the left side is all the sugary sodas, right? And on the right side is all the chips, right? Garbage, both sides. And, you can't get anything good. And you shouldn't buy any of that stuff because the moment you have it in your house, right, the temptation level goes up. So if people ask me, well, how do I change my diet? I said, just don't buy that stuff. Don't even have it in the house, right? And it's possible to get down. We also know, I mean, one of the problems with ultra-processed foods is we're at 60% of our calories. The Italians are up at 20%. And there's a great study out of Brazil that looked at ultra-processed foods and dementia. And the more ultra-processed foods you eat, the higher your cognitive decline and dementia level is. It's a very bad place to be. One of the problems, I think, in our societies, the economists will say, well, if you produce something and it has externalities, bad effects, you should pay for it. That's how we make sure that you're responsible. Well, we have those bad effects from ultra-processed foods, but we don't make the companies making that stuff pay for them, unfortunately. In fact, as I've mentioned, we've subsidized them, and we have to get out of that business. We have to actually improve our diet and the kind of foods that we present to people. It can't be that fruits and vegetables and dairy are more expensive than the ultra-processed foods, which is what we've created today, which is why a lot of people consume so much ultra-processed foods. And this isn't fair to them as they grow old. Increases their risk of hypertension, diabetes, cardiac disease, cancers. It's not a good place for us as a country to be. And GLP-1s aren't going to solve that problem.
Right. Let's hold on to the GLP-1 and the cost in this. I'm going to come back to that because people have given me a whole lot of hit lists for advice. This is Zeke GPT here working. Supplements.
No.
Good. There you have it.
Yeah. No, Americans spend a lot on supplements, billions and billions of dollars on supplements. And in general, they're a waste of money. Now, there are segments that need them. You're a woman thinking about becoming pregnant, you need folate, for example, decreases the risk of terrible diseases like spina bifida. Or you're older, or you're a vegan, vitamin B12. And people often, especially if they don't have enough fish and other items, might need omega-3s and 6s. But in general, they're not something you need. There's a editorial by some Johns Hopkins nutrition scientist who said, stop buying supplements, basically. Just don't do it. You don't need it.
Okay. Gender dynamics in these recommendations. How do they change?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, so it's specifically for women, we're hearing more about menopause, perimenopause, how some of the things may change with regards to protein or GLP-1 use or these other aspects of wellness that medicine is actually, frankly, ignored.
Yes. So we have done a terrible disservice around the research and expert opinion assessing is what the optimal way to handle menopause, the menopausal symptoms, and postmenopausal issues like osteoporosis. Very bad situation, and again, sort of hormone replacement therapy is kind of like alcohol. You feel like you've been whipsawed back and forth. Do it to to address all the side effects and complications from menopause. Don't do it. It causes cancer and blood clots. Do it. It's okay. And I think it's been legitimately hard for women to follow. And I think, the recommendations have changed. We don't have, I think I'm fair to say, don't have optimal dosage, but it's safer than had previously been advertised, and the risks are much more tolerable, especially when you titrate them against the symptoms. And if the symptoms are driving you nuts, then you have to do something about it. I will say, as all of us age, one of the most important things is we lose muscle mass, and it really begins to accelerate after the mid to late 50s, and especially after 60. We lose about 6 to 8 to 10% muscle mass per decade. That's a lot. And so you do have to up your protein a little bit consciously at that time. You have to make sure that you are doing, strength training to keep your muscle mass as you age, and that's important whether
and that
you're
helps on
a
bone
boy
density.
or a girl.
Yeah, but it helps on bone density as well.
Absolutely. It's stressing the system micro fractures, micro tears in the muscles and bones, really important for strengthening them. And that's why I, recommend, and I think most people recommend, is to alternate the kinds of exercises you're doing and don't just do the same routine over and over again. You need to give your bones and muscles a chance to heal in between exercise routine, and don't go overboard, because then you're going to get repetitive motion injuries, increase your chance of having an injury rather than improve your strength.
Working out by going for doing something in nature, working out in the gym, working out, taking a class like SoulCycle or Orange Theory or something like that.
Well, rule number one is work out. The most important thing is to go from horizontal to vertical. Because, a huge proportion of the American public doesn't work out at all. And something like 80% of the population, the thing they like to, the relaxation they do is sedentary. That is terrible. You have to actually work out. So the biggest health improvement is going from horizontal to vertical and doing something, whether it's walking, running, riding your bicycle, whatever. In general, getting out in nature is better than the other alternatives. I happen to live on the East Coast, where it does get cold this time of year. It's slated to be below zero this coming weekend. When it gets cold, I don't ride my bicycle outside. I do 3 20-minute classes a week indoors. When it's beautiful outside, I will go for an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes, riding 30 miles in nature. And it's glorious, and my mind wanders, and, it's very rejuvenating. And by the way,
better yet, take a friend.
There you go. I like to think of wellness trifectas. What are the things you can do that, you can combine multiple wellness things together? You can exercise out in nature and socialize with someone else. I used to do it all the time. I had a very good friend at the NIH, and we used to go out 3 times a week running for 5 or 6 miles. He happened to be a psychiatrist, so I got my therapy sessions in for free. And we would go out and we would talk about what was happening at work, moaning and bitching about the higher ups, of course, whatever it was. And it was great. We got our exercise in, we got our nature exposure, and we were socializing. Very, very important to think about those kind of trifectas. So,
sauna, cold plunge.
Well, cold plunge is stupid. Who would want to get into 32-degree water? On the other hand, 150-degree sauna where you're sweating, I don't know. That's really nice. It's really fun, and I love it. Yes. But whatever your preference is, you like the cold? Good, by all means, jump in. I don't know why you like the cold. Even the Finns who live in a cold place, they prefer the saunas. And they, by the way, have shown that 4 saunas a week, really, really good for your health.
Yeah.
So,
what healthy habit, if we could CRISPR it out of another country and splice it into ours, what healthy habit should we insert into our country's DNA?
Okay, so I spend a part of my time in Norway because I have a research project there. And one of the things, first of all, you should know, the Norwegians are, if not the most unreligious people in the world, they're up there, very high up there. The Lutheran Church is just sustained by the state, but no one goes. On the other hand, there's no shops open on Sunday. None. It's family day. And you go out and people are walking and climbing mountains and going out to places in family groups. Whether it's snowing or raining, no matter what the weather, they're out there doing physical exercise, hiking, basically, sometimes running. I think that's something we don't do as much of. Just close things. I really, when I was a young kid, I regretted the blue laws. I lived in Massachusetts and there were blue laws, no stores were open. And I actually think it's a good thing. It would be better if we dialed down the commerce and dialed up spending time with other people, out hiking. Again, you get a trifecta. You're out in nature, you're hiking, and you're socializing. And they do that every week. It is wonderful. And the same thing is true in Switzerland. Saturdays, you get on a train, you're going out of town, and there's everyone. 80-year-olds on down to little kids in their hiking gear, and they're going to get off the train, hike a trail, come back down, 3 or 4 hours later, get back on a train and go home. We should have a little more of that in this country. It would be a very good practice for everyone.
All right, we're running low on time, and I want to get, we didn't even get to the title of ice cream in there. So
right.
that is something you're going to have to read the book about, why, which I was very happy to see personally as that world. But I think we got through the majority of questions. Hopefully we'll get a few more in still in here. I just really want to touch on in 60 seconds sleep.
Yes.
Because we have a culture here, Silicon Valley right now, the founder, the just go, like what now people refer to it is 9-6-6. You work from 9 to 6, 6 days a week.
Terrible idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, I had a debate partner when I was in high school, and he is like constantly moaning, a third of my life is wasted to sleep. And, he tried to work harder and less sleep. Just think about it for a second. We're sleeping 8 hours a day, right? It makes you the most vulnerable you could be as an animal, right? You're unconscious, you're out there, any predator can come and have you for dinner. The idea that it's preserved for thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years tells you one thing: absolutely vital. We may not know why. We don't have the full story. And certainly when I was in med school, we had no idea why people slept, right? But it's vitally important and you shouldn't compromise. And then if you look at the data, right, about the distribution of sleep, yes, there are some people who are short sleepers, need 5 hours or less. Turns out it's about 1% of the population has a genetic defect that makes them short sleepers. The rest of us, solidly between 7 and 9 hours. So this notion that, like the president says, I'm a short sleeper, mostly, okay? Forget that. And, all these CEOs, short sleep means you basically punch drunk, you don't make good decisions, you're actually pretty close to like you're under the influence of alcohol. The misjudgments are pretty much the same. We need sleep to clean out the brain, to rejuvenate the body, to do DNA repair, lots of things, to move our temporary memories from the hippocampus, that's here, inside the ears, to our forebrain, where the long-term memories are there. We don't do sleep. We don't have such good memories. All of that is very, very important. The problem with sleep as a wellness behavior is you can will yourself to ride the bike. You can will yourself to eat better. You can will yourself to actually talk to people. You can't will yourself to sleep. Mm-hmm. You can make the bed, but then you're, have to succumb to nature, right? And I can tell you, when I'm thinking hard about a paper or writing a book, hard to fall asleep, right? How did I say this? So we can do certain things. And here, I should forget all the sleep medications, all right? Just throw them out. When you go home, clear them out, okay? American Academy of Sleep Medicine, they don't work, all right? Not the melatonin, not the magnesium, whatever else schmutz you got at home, forget it, okay? The only thing that works is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. We don't have enough therapists. Maybe AI will help us. But you can, get the room dark. Don't look at your phone for an hour before. I like to go to bed by reading an actual book, tangible book, and I know when my eyes are like going over that paragraph for the third time and I can't remember what it said, time to turn the light off and go to bed. You can make the room cool, cover up all those little blue dots, green dots, red dots, all those dots, no good, So that's what you can do, and, you can practice it and get better at it.
Great. So I'm going to move us along because we have to talk. You're one of the architects of the Affordable Care Act, along with Bob Kocher, who's here. To both of you, I think the country owes you an incredible debt of service for giving access to so many Americans care. When you look at the federal landscape, there's a lot to dig in here. This could be a whole nother book.
Yes, I'm working on that book.
Faster, please. Because we all are trying to figure out what's going on between, vaccines, MAHA, one big, beautiful bill. What do you, how do you think about that? How do you keep it, like all the chaos, help us see through your eyes as a policymaker, what's going on?
So let's just take each one. On the vaccines, it's only nonsense coming out of Washington, and it's really destructive. We are going to see lots of people die, unfortunately, mostly kids. We're already seeing huge explosions in measles, diphtheria is rising, lots of other things are going to happen. Really unfortunate, and I don't know what else to say. On the diet, I think RFK Jr.'s dietary guidelines have moved us somewhat in a better direction. Still a lot of stuff that makes no sense, like the overemphasis on beef, the claims of seed oils being bad for you. That's wrong, but I like what he said about ultra-processed foods, cutting back on sugars, cutting back on salts, eating more plant proteins, eating more fruits and vegetables, cooking more at home. I think that's actually in a good direction. They are clearly trying to do everything to dismantle the Affordable Care Act without formally being able to repeal it. And the fact of the matter is, I think we passed the Affordable Care Act 16 years ago in March. And we have seen some great positives. As DJ mentioned, 25 million or so Americans got health insurance, lots of people, and we know health insurance is associated with actually living longer, reducing your risk of death substantially. We have a lot of good data that that's true. So we've saved a lot of lives. In addition, healthcare costs remained at 17.5% of GDP for 13, 14 years. They're now going up. We have an affordability crisis, and the problem is no one has figured out what we need to do. My own diet.
This is the core argument of the subsidies going on right now.
Yeah, but it goes well beyond the subsidies. The problem now is, even if you have insurance, right, you don't feel like you can afford health care. There are lots of people who have insurance are like, can I go to the doctor or not go to the doctor? Yeah, totally. There's all sorts of things. The emergency room, right? I go to the emergency room. Then the insurance company says, it wasn't a true emergency. We're not paying it now. You got a $10,000 bill. It's all crazy. And we've got deductibles that are $5,000. It's like, that's not insurance. So we're going to need a comprehensive reform. We haven't had a thorough plan that's been vetted, that's ready to go. Now, let me just give you a little history lesson here. Medicare was proposed in 1957. It wasn't passed to 68. The ACA, Romney experimented with it in 2005 in Massachusetts, and then we implemented it nationally in 2010, and even before 2005, the guts were proposed. We need new ideas. The healthcare policy community has not been great with new ideas. We're going to have to think about restructuring the system much more comprehensively, even than the Affordable Care Act did. We don't have time to go through it, but we have to simplify the system. The system has gotten so complicated. We have hundreds of different ways of getting insurance. We got to reduce that. We have complicated payment because we have so many different insurance companies. Each one pays in a different mechanism. That adds enormously to administrative costs. We spend 20% of our healthcare dollars on administration, which is ludicrous. No other country comes close. Quality is all over the place. Quality on cancer care in America is very high compared to the rest of the world. But quality on hypertension, diabetes, and a lot of other illnesses, very, very much at the bottom. So we need a comprehensive rethink of the healthcare system and a refocus, in my opinion, on how do we keep people healthy and how do we manage chronic illnesses better? Because our problem isn't acute illnesses. right? It's not the infections, it's not the broken bones, it's really chronic illnesses. Half the American population has a chronic illness. And so I think we're going to have to rethink the whole thing in a way that we haven't been willing to do. My own view is we have to start with a fundamental change. We need to say that there are only two ways of getting healthcare coverage. One is your employer provides it. If your employer doesn't provide it, you go into an exchange and you have a limited number of choices, and they're standardized. So they're not playing tricks on you and getting you to buy something you don't need. And that will help a lot. And then, by the way, I think we need to have long-term contracts. Why do we renew our insurance every year? That actually is a very bad thing from a standpoint. Think about the insurance company. You're renewing your insurance every year. How long you stay with me is like 1, 2, 3 years. I'm not investing in you. By the time I get a return by controlling your blood pressure or controlling your diabetes, you're with some other insurance company. What's my incentive? So we have to change that entire dynamic. And the only way to do that is have you have a relationship for a lot longer. Mm-hmm. And the last thing is, we've gotten rid of primary care docs in this country. Part of it's money, part of it's the intellectual challenge that we've sort of taken away. We have to change that system. I do believe that AI is going to be a really important element in changing that system. There are a lot of things that AI can do that, regular doctors can do, and AI can do it better. Well,
which is interesting from the guy that said no use of AI in this.
Yeah. Well, I didn't use AI for this.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
For medicine, it's a lot easier.
In less 30 seconds or less, what makes
You're trying to constrain me here?
Yes. Yeah, I've been tempting. 30 seconds or less, how do you keep your optimism?
What else do you have? So again, I go back to Ben Franklin. And Ben Franklin, one of his guiding principles was be useful. And by be useful, he meant, how are you going to make the world a better place? That's why we're here, making the world a better place. And he was an inveterate improver of his community. He created the University of Pennsylvania. He created an insurance company. He created a fire department. He created the first hospital in the United States. He created, lightning rods to prevent cities burning up when lightning struck buildings. He is a civic improver. And by the way, he's one of the great all-time inventors, top 5, still to this day, right? He never patented a single invention of his because he thought, give it out to the world, it'll make it better, people will improve.
He did this on his second career.
Huh?
He did this all in his second career.
All after he retired, that's right. And I think that's how I maintain my option. How can we improve the world? Now, my job is, how can I improve the world? I do as best as I can, but I think all of us have to do it, whether it's in our community, it's bigger in the national stage with the Affordable Care Act. But doing that actually will also be a key wellness thing because you will keep yourself engaged and thinking harder about how you can make the world better, whether it's through, tutoring kids or teaching or what have you. So that's how I maintain my optimism.
Well said. I want to end this with my favorite quote in your book, which is from the British rabbi Jonathan Sacks. We defeat death not by living forever, but by living our values that live forever. Our thanks to Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, author of Eat Your Ice Cream, 6 Simple Rules for... Author of Eat Your Ice Cream, six Simple Rules for a Long and Healthy Life. We didn't even scratch the surface of all the good things in here. We encourage you to pick up a copy of Dr. Emanuel's book here or at your local bookstore. Emphasis local bookstore. And remember, please consider becoming a member here at the Commonwealth Club, World Affairs Club, to support more great programming like this one. If you enjoyed this program, I'll be interviewing Dr. Bob Wachter on February 9th about his new book about healthcare and AI, and Maya Shankar, who started the behavioral and social sciences team at the White House on February 18th, about her new and inspiring book. For more information about the Commonwealth Club, World Affairs, membership, or any upcoming programs, Please visit us online at www.commonwealthclub.org or talk to any of the great volunteers that are here helping out today. For those of you that are here joining us live, we have a special treat for you outside, which is why we always want you to join in person. I'm DJ Patil, and I thank you for joining us, Zeke. And please do not be a schmuck, be a mensch, and always eat your ice cream.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zeke. That was fun.